said.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. No, only beautiful things. I'd like to start, first of all, thanks for coming here.
Pleasure.
Wonderful to have you in Helsinki, Finland, and this is not the first time. You have been here before once.
I was here for my last book. I have a wonderful publisher here that you just spoke to, and I thought any publisher that puts me in a smoke sauna and throws me in the ocean, I'm coming back.
Sounds good. So this is the only thing I'm going to say about myself tonight because it's all about you. Just wanted to say that when I was 20, 2005, 2006, I read the Da Vinci Code, and that was the main thing why I started to read again after high school.
Thank you.
That's the main inspiration why I started to read, became a writer. So for me it's a huge thing to be here with you tonight. Just. Start with a quote. At least I think it's a quote. You have said about TV versus books. That one thing you love about books is how they are different to each people. So you write one book, but basically you write a million books. And I think that's very beautiful put. So maybe you can elaborate.
Well, as an author, you know that you create a character that in your mind is one way, and for every single one of your readers, it's something different. And the reader will create the version of, in my case, Robert Langdon, the exact character that is the best for them. And that's one of the reasons, movies are fun, but once the movie comes out, everybody pictures the same character. So when Hollywood came and said, we want to make Da Vinci Code, I said, no, I really want to write a lot of books, and then we'll do the movie. And they did what Hollywood does. They appealed to my ego. They said, this book is so important. It is a cultural touchstone, and there are people in the world who don't read or can't read, and we need to tell them this story. It is that important. And I thought, yes, for the good of mankind, make a movie. And we did.
So how did you find Tom Hanks when they picked him for the role of Robert Langdon?
Well, Tom Hanks is phenomenal. He's one of the great actors, and yes, an incredibly nice guy. And so working with Tom Hanks and Ron Howard was an absolute pleasure. We had so much fun. And Ron Howard told me when they wanted to have Tom Hanks, he said, he's an actor that you like to watch think. There are some actors that you like to watch, blowing up buildings. But Tom Hanks is somebody you like to watch think. And he was right.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. I'd like to start with talking about the process, basically the writing process. And I think you are one of the most studied persons, studied authors on the planet in terms of how to build a structure for a good thriller. And I've heard you telling about 3 C's: contract, clock, and crucible.
Yes.
So would you tell the people what you mean by those 3 C's and why they are that important when you are creating a novel from scratch?
Sure. Well, as you know, writers have a relationship with their readers. We may never meet you, but you are trusting us when you get a book and sit down to spend your valuable time reading. You're trusting that we're going to take you on a journey that you like, that we won't break any rules, that will be fair with the reader. And the first of the C's is a contract. And that is just what I'm talking about now, this contract with the reader to say, listen, if you dedicate your time to reading this book, I promise when you're done, I'll give you all the answers. I'm not going to leave anything hanging. I'm not going to have an ending where you go, what? How did that happen? So that's the contract. There's something called the crucible. Now a crucible is just it's an enclosure from which the characters cannot flee. You really want to make your characters face their demons. If you wrote a book about somebody who meets a bear in a big field and the character has a Jeep and can just drive away, that's not a very interesting story. If there's a crucible and he meets the bear inside a cabin that's locked, that's a story. So this notion of really compressing the action, don't let your characters run away, make them face their obstacles. And the clock. The most critical in thrillers, you see we have a clock right here. The most critical is to make sure that the action happens in a certain amount of time. The typical stories, the Ian Fleming, James Bond stories. I have to get to the bomb before it blows up. That's the simplest form, but there are many forms. There was a book called The Bridges of Madison County, where 2 people had to figure out the relationship before somebody came home the next day. That's a ticking clock. If they had a year to figure it out, it wouldn't have been a story. So those 3 things, crucible, clock, and contract, are very, very important.
Right. There was a question from the readers. We got them previously, and I handpicked a couple that has something to do with the clock. Because he or she, they asked if it's on purpose, if you do all the books happen basically in less than 24 hours, or maybe not that time, but basically your books seldom happen in, say, 3 months' time.
Yes.
So is that something you do on purpose?
I like telling real-time stories. Yes, I do it absolutely on purpose. It's much easier to write a story that takes a lot of time. Because in novels and in movies, it's amazing what the brain can do. You can see somebody fall asleep in a movie, they fall asleep, and then the next cut is they're in a supermarket and the sun's out. You say, oh, it's the next day. Your brain just fills it all in.
Yes.
It's very easy to trust the reader to do that. I like to tell stories in a very compressed way since the reader knows what's happening in all the different storylines at that moment. Also, compressing the story really makes you work much harder as a writer and makes the experience more exciting for the reader. It makes, well, I should tell you, when we wrote the Da Vinci Code, or I wrote the Da Vinci Code, gave it to my editor, he loved it, he loved the compressed time frame, and we gave it to a senior editor at Penguin Random House, someone who edits very literary thrillers. He said, I love this book, it's fantastic, I have one edit. You need to tell the story over 2 weeks, not over 1 day. And I thought about it, and I talked to my editor about it, and we decided, no, we're not going to do that. The book came out and did pretty well. And the senior editor said, you guys do whatever you want. Don't listen to me. So I've written all these books with compressed time frames. It's a way to challenge myself and force myself to keep the pages turning.
And what you've also been telling in your interviews is basically if you take any story like thriller or whodunit crime novel, you basically have the same, or not you, but in general there's the same pattern that we follow, like that the central pattern people want to see when they buy a book. So you said that it's not about what, it's more about how.
Sure.
So would you elaborate a little bit on
Sure.
that?
I mean, we just talked about James Bond. Nobody opens a James Bond book wondering if James Bond will manage to defuse the bomb or if he'll get the girl. We're pretty sure that he's going to save the day and get the girl. We just want to see how it happens. And when you open a Robert Langdon novel, you're pretty sure Robert Langdon's going to survive. He's going to solve the mystery. The bad guys are going to have a very bad day at the end. And those are things, that's part of the contract. I promise you that will happen. The reason you read the story is to find out how it happens. And our job as writers is to make that process as difficult as possible for the author. Or excuse me, it's always hard for the author. It got to be really hard for the protagonist, for the hero. In fact, I write the end of the book first because I want to know where I'm headed and I want to have a fixed star that I'm moving toward. And then I rewind as far away as I can and draw a line between A and B and put terrible things in the way and make Robert Langdon figure it out.
Okay, you do the ending quite early on, but have you heard you do like a board of images of some kind as well? So what point do you do that?
Well, it's something I've never photographed because it makes me look like a crazy person, which, who knows? Anyway, yeah, so if you've read one of my novels, especially this one, you know that they're fairly complicated. There's a lot of different plot lines going on at the same time. There's a lot of locations, there's a lot of codes and puzzles and riddles, and there's just a lot happening. And it's hard for me to keep it all straight in my mind. I'm a very visual person, and so I will create boards that will have a note here with a piece of string that points over here to this note, pictures and things. That's like a real visual sense of the progression of ideas in the novel. And somebody saw it once and they said, I saw a movie when they finally found this crazy serial killer, and this is what his room looked like. And that made me kind of sad.
Well, that happens.
These things happen.
Part of the job. This Secret of the Secrets is at least the Finnish edition is 650 pages long, more or less. So how big is the initial draft? How long is it? Is there a lot of things you have to edit out?
Yes, and I edit as I go, so realistically, and this is not an exaggeration, I would say that for every 1 page in this novel, I wrote 10 that didn't make the novel. there's never a version that's 10 times this thick. I'll write the first 5 chapters, and then maybe they're 50 pages, and I'll edit and edit and edit, and now they're down to 20 pages.
Right.
And so I really edit as I go. And then, this novel was around 200,000 words before it went through the final edit, and I think we got it down to 185, something like that. And the more you edit, the faster the book feels. And our job is really to give the readers exactly what they need and nothing more. I tend to fall in love with my own research and will say, hey, Prague Castle, let me tell you for 6 pages about Prague Castle. You don't need 6 pages on Prague Castle, and I'm often reminded that in the editorial process. But that is part of our job, is to make sure that you have a flavor of Prague Castle, a couple interesting tidbits about Prague Castle. You have a picture of it in your mind, that Prague Castle becomes a character in the book, and that your characters are interacting with this location. And beyond that, if you really want to know more about Prague Castle, you buy a travel guide. For this, you want to find out what happens to Robert Langdon and to his other characters.
Right. There's actually also a question from the readers regarding to killing your darlings. And the question was how easy or difficult it is to kill your darlings.
Yeah, I mean, that phrase is a phrase that writers all know, kill your darlings, meaning just the things that you love in a novel, a character or a scene. If they're not working for the overall plot, you have to kill them, you have to cut them. And you may love them, but save them for another book, or just read them alone sometime, but don't make your readers read them. And that's really, really important. That's where, and my editor and I say this all the time, does it serve the story? Yes, it's a great scientific experiment, or yes, it's a great character, but does it serve the story? And if the answer is no, then it goes. If the answer is sort of, then you either kill it or figure out how to really plug it into the narrative. And this book actually had a character named Swedenborg, who was a curator of the Devil's Bible. And he was in the story for maybe 3 years, and had a role and had a whole plot line, and suddenly, almost on the same day, my editor and I decided Swedenborg's got to go. And we killed this guy. Well, actually, we didn't kill him. We just took him out of the book. He never existed. So, I feel badly for Swedenborg, but,
Yeah, the actor who was supposed to play him. It's like
exactly. And there's a Swedish actor who's very depressed.
Exactly. So, research. Talking about research, you are, it feels like nobody does as much research as you do. What is your main source for research? You go to places, obviously. You spend a lot of time you did spend a lot of time in Prague.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
You also talk to specialists. So
Sure.
Please tell a bit more about the whole research process.
The research process starts with reading. I read a lot of books. They're all nonfiction to help me write these books. So I will read, for example, this book is about human consciousness. I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a noetic scientist, so I needed to learn a lot about consciousness to figure out 2 things. Who are the specialists that I need to talk to? And I needed to know enough that when they responded, I had some idea what they were talking about. So that's really the first phase, is to do the reading and find out who you want to talk to. But it really is the conversations with specialists in any field. It could be a curator of a museum, it could be a priest, it could be a scientist, it could be somebody from the tourist bureau in Prague, it could be anybody. That is the next phase, is to gather all of these conversations. And the question I like to ask the most is, look, I've asked you 20 questions. What's the one question I forgot to ask? What is that thing you're dying to tell me that I forgot to ask about? And invariably, something interesting comes out of that. The reason I do so much research is that, much like location, the research also helps drive the plot. It helps me decide what it is I'm writing. And I had an experience. I wrote a book called Origin, and some of it takes place in the church, the Cathedral of Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. And I was almost finished with the book. And I went back to Sagrada Familia to just get a little bit of information about Gaudi's tomb, because I wanted to set a scene there. And while I was there, on my 3rd visit to the cathedral over a number of years, I discovered a staircase, a very, very steep spiral staircase that was incredibly dangerous. And I saw it and I said, somebody needs to die in here. I've got to kill somebody. And my villain was still alive in my current draft. I said, no, he's going to die right there. And I went back and I rewrote the story, and sorry if you haven't read it, somebody dies in the staircase. But that's the sort of thing where research drives the plot.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time in these books that I find that there's a 2/3 scale model of the Eiffel Tower in Prague. And I go and I write it, and the elevator is really scary and really small, and Robert Langdon is claustrophobic, and I think, well, he's gonna have to ride this elevator. I don't know why or how, but that's part of figuring out the plot.
Right. That's interesting. So you don't use that much Google AI to figure out like what things look like. And
I will certainly. I don't use AI because it gets everything wrong.
Right.
I know it'll be better soon, but I can't tell you how many times I've asked AI a question. It gives me an answer with total confidence. It is 100% wrong. And I keep telling this AI, like, if you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know. Don't invent something that sounds so close to what the answer might be. So I do not use AI. I'm sure it'll get better. And I'm sure it's wonderful at some things.
yeah.
But I do, of course, use Google to sort of say, well, if Langdon has to get from this point to this point in Prague, and I happen to be in the United States, let me find out what street he would take. What's the car that he would take? What's the tram he would take? And then I also call my editor in Prague, and I've had him running all over the city. It's funny. I had him on the phone. I said, look, how long does it take at a jog to get from here to here? And he's like, I'm not in shape. I said, just do the best you can.
So you must be recognized at many places, and do you always have to stay in queue? Do they let you in, like, this is Mr. Dan Brown, he's probably going to write about this place. So do they let you in for free or anything like this?
Well, they either let me in or they keep me out. The Vatican's not ever been that happy to see me.
Yeah.
But, other places, it depends. I mean, there's so many curators who are excited about whatever it is that they curate that they can't wait to possibly see it in a book and possibly raise the awareness of it. And sometimes it's a little bit of a game because these books take me a long time to write, and I don't want anybody to know what I'm writing about because somebody else will come out with a book about the same thing before me. And so I remember when I was researching Inferno, I was in St. John's Baptistry in Florence with a curator, and all I wanted to know was if the Dante mosaic on the roof, there's a mosaic of the devil, a three-headed devil, and he's eating people. It's this horrible image. And there's the story that Dante Alighieri, as a young boy, was in the baptistry, looked up and saw this image, and was incredibly frightened and was inspired to write Inferno. And I wanted to know from the curator if that was accurate and some other things, but I also didn't want him to know I was asking about it. And so I asked 5 or 6 questions that were totally irrelevant, and stuck that one in just in passing. Oh, by the way, I'm just curious. And I got the answer and ignored everything else he told me.
So I look at the questions from people sent in advance, and I figured out there are quite many aspiring writers in this place. So could you raise your hands? Who is right now writing a book, or maybe it was just the questions because I don't see any hands. Oh yeah, there's some hands. Okay, great. There are some hands, right? So I just the Guggenheim reminded me of this. I think you have said that the best advice for a writer is you have to start writing, and when you do research, you do your 4th time walking around Guggenheim, it's not research, it's just being tourist.
There's that too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, to the writers here, I would tell you 2 things. A lot of teachers will say, write what you know, and I'm not sure that's true. I like to write what I want to know. And I would encourage you to say, what is that topic that fascinates you? Go out and start researching it and writing about it, and as you write about it and learn about it, the passion that you feel for the learning process will come through in your writing. And that's important. The other thing I'm telling you is that there really is no such thing as writer's block. What that is when you're paralyzed is that's you forgetting that what you're writing is a first draft. You forgetting that you're the only one who's going to see this. So write whatever comes to mind. It will be wrong. That's part of the process. Write the wrong thing a bunch of times and let that be the process by which you find the right thing.
Right, and it's great you say that you should write about something you don't know, you want to learn about. I think it kind of, people read it, they see that you have been, eager to learn about it. Because I think that's what they teach everywhere, it's like vice versa. That you should write something you know about. And I think it's kind of boring.
Well, go find out about something, then write about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this must be a question you get asked a lot, but I just have to ask about the inspiration because you have seen a lot of the world and you have written so many books. You must have so many ideas. So how do you choose a topic? How do you choose an idea from all the ideas you must have? And where do you get the inspiration for those ideas?
Well, I mean, it comes down to writing what you want to know. I'm fascinated with human consciousness. I have been for a long time. I like to write about big topics, and that's sort of no secret. I've always written about sort of something large and interesting. And there really is no bigger topic than human consciousness. It's the lens through which we experience reality. I didn't know how hard it was going to be to write about human consciousness, that's for sure. That's one of the reasons this took so long. But in general, to answer your question, I choose a topic that I know will interest me for a number of years, and a topic that I think, you know what, there's so much here that if I included 5% of this, it would be fascinating. And it could be absolutely anything. It doesn't need to be something like human consciousness. It could be winemaking or sailing. But you dive into it at a level that shows your reader you really understand it and lets them see sailing or winemaking through a lens they've never seen it before.
Right. And how about the locations? Like how many? It feels like a city is usually one of the characters. Like it used to be Paris, and in this case it's Prague. So how do you choose the city? Does it have to be a city you really love, a place you've been many times, or do you, yeah?
Well, it has to be a place that is. I don't have to love it.
Yeah.
I just have to know that it is absolutely relevant to the plot.
Yes.
So I wrote a book about the Freemasons and the architecture of Washington, D.C. I obviously set that in D.C. I wrote a book about Dante. I set that in Florence, Dante's home. This book about Prague. Prague is the mystical center of Europe, and also is perfect Langen world with tunnels and towers and castles and a door that has 7 locks, which I thought was really cool. So it has to just be integral to the plot, really.
Right.
I write books that have to be set in a specific location, because you want to see that location through new eyes.
Right, yeah. And also science, it's really fascinating, like especially in the new book. There's so much information, so much science behind it. So would you say you write the story first, like the story is the most important thing, and then you just add the science, or is it vice versa?
No, the science, like the location, drives the plot. The science of consciousness, I mean, I read a lot about consciousness before I knew I could write this book.
Right.
And it really was saying, okay, I want to show Prague, I want to show some of these scientific experiments, I want to show the world of book publishing in New York. How do I take these themes? How do I build a plot that lets me talk about all these things? So I kind of think of plot as the scaffolding on which you hang all of your ideas. And that's really the way I think of it.
Right. And the characters, not only the places, but the actual characters. So you don't have too many characters, which personally I like the fact that there's not 100,000 characters in one book.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard to keep track, especially if it's a foreign book for me, and if there's like 50, 60 characters.
This is why I gave up reading Russian classics.
Exactly, right. That's exactly why, the thing is that, do you create the hero first, or the villain, or like, is there an order you do all this?
Sure. Well, I mean, I create the villain first for 2 reasons. One is my hero exists already. I know who the hero is. But for any of you out there who are writing and trying to figure out who is my hero, write your villain first, because your villain defines your hero. Nobody can be heroic if they don't have challenges. If they say in tennis that I can't remember which 2 tennis players, maybe it was Borg and Lendl, that they never would have been that good without the other. That you really need that antagonistic force to create your hero. So write your villain first. I happen to like villains who do the wrong thing for the right reason, meaning they move in that gray area between right and wrong. They're not just evil, they just have a different idea about how to do something good. As an example, in Inferno, there's a villain, I guess you call him a villain, who is very aware that the Earth cannot support 9 million people. That he wants to save the human race from overpopulation, and he believes, statistically, the only way to do it is to remove half of the population. Well, that's, not a very nice thing to do, but it's for a good reason. And so that makes an interesting hero.
It does, yeah. So do you write the characters around the story, or the story around the characters?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's usually the characters. For example, if and you know this as well as anybody in the room, that you're writing along and then you need somebody. You need a piece of information. Who can Langdon call to get this information? Well, I guess he's calling this guy, and you create that guy. It's funny, if you've read my books, you know that Robert Langdon is very lucky. In every book, he very conveniently meets a beautiful, brilliant woman on page one. And this woman is, she's perfect in every way and knows exactly, she has the skill set that Langdon needs on that day. He's very, very lucky. In this book, I wanted to do something different. That I wanted him to actually be in love. He's been a consummate bachelor, always meets a new woman. So I brought someone from his past. And the tricky thing about writing Langdon in love is that I wanted it to be a solid relationship, not one that's just starting, but I also wanted to experience the romance and the sparks of the beginning of a relationship. So I brought a character from his backstory, Catherine Solomon. They've been colleagues for years. They've been flirting for years. They've sort of been circling each other as good friends, but it's never quite been right. And so you see them, they have a friendship, but you experience that moment when the friendship turns romantic, and so you get the best of both worlds.
Right. So how much view is in Robert Langdon? Like, is it based anyhow on you?
Langdon's the guy I wish I could be. He has a much more interesting life than I do. He runs around, the world solving mysteries, and I'm at my computer in the dark typing. We share a passion in symbols, art, codes, and all of that. It's funny, somebody, I said once, but of course Langdon's much smarter than I am. And somebody said, excuse me, you have to think of everything he says, so how can he be smarter? And I had to explain that when Langdon walks by a painting and just off the top of his head gives you a perfect synopsis of the painting, that took me 3 days to research and write. So that's one thing that people forget about writing. And the great thing about writing, it's so much better than life. We've all had that experience when we're in a conversation, maybe a little argument, and we say something and we walk away. 10 seconds later, we say, oh, you know what I should have said? Writers get to go back and just change that line. We can't do that in real life.
That's true.
That's why writing's so fun.
Yeah, true. But the villains, I think in all your books, there's this kind of villain we see at first, from the very beginning we see him or her. But then again, there's this puppet master, like this super villain that we don't see immediately. So is it something you do in, you like this kind of level, that there's several levels between the villains?
Sure. I mean, we all love that aha moment when we finally figure out what's happening. And the only way you can create that for smart readers is to give them many options, to point them in all the wrong directions, and finally at the end go, no, it was right in front of you the whole time.
Right.
And that's just fun for a reader. I love reading books that do that. I love seeing movies that do that.
Yeah.
And I love writing books that do that. And part of that is having many, many layers of good and evil in the book, and also characters that are complicated, that are actually not good or evil. They're human, and they're doing what they think they need to do, either to protect themselves, to protect the country, to save someone they love, and maybe they're bending the rules to get there.
Yeah.
And if you've written a good character, you can watch them do something terrible and say, I get it. I know why you did that.
Yeah. Why do you think that people love conspiracies? I think you can call this a conspiracy in this book as well.
Sure.
With the CIA and...
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The human mind despises chaos and despises randomness. We hate to think that life is random. And I always tell the story that I had a friend when I was 7 years old who got leukemia and died. And I went to the church service, and the priest told me this was part of God's plan. And I remember thinking two things. One, what a terrible plan. And two, that somehow made me feel better. That it wasn't just random. That it couldn't have been avoided. And that's one thing that religion does very well. It tells you, look, if you've had a terrible year, it's not randomly terrible. That's God testing you. You're strong. He's testing you, and he has a plan for you. And it makes us feel better. Conspiracy theory is the same way. Yeah. We don't want to think that things happen randomly.
Yeah.
That's too scary.
Yeah.
We like to think that there's some deep state government cabal pulling strings. In short, we like to know that somebody's driving the bus. If we're sitting on the bus, if this life is on a bus and nobody's driving, it's pretty upsetting. We'd rather have somebody evil driving the bus. It makes us feel better than no driver. So that's where conspiracy theory comes from.
Right. That makes sense. So I had this privilege of having a little chat with your father on backstage. And he told that he used to make these kind of treasure maps for you for Christmas. Like that you wouldn't get the presents right away, but you would have to, to do some work.
Yes.
For them. So yeah, is that because, or is it the reason you are so interested in different, symbols and?
You're implying my father damaged my brain, which is probably true, but in a good way. We had treasure hunts as kids all the time. We had no television. We said, my parents said you're going to read, learn to love reading books, and learn to play music. And so we did both. And my dad is a math teacher and a math writer. My mom was an organist, a church organist, and so I had a very religious life and a very rational, logical, mathematical life. I should also mention that music is a symbolic language. Mathematics is a symbolic language. It all sort of filtered in to my love of symbols. But yeah, we would have these wonderful treasure hunts where we'd come down and we'd just get a code to find our presents. And we'd have to follow this code to a different room and follow this code and keep solving codes. So for me, treasure hunts were the most fun of any day of the year. And so when it came time to write a hero, I wrote a professor who loves treasure hunts.
There's a connection.
What do you know?
So your father is here tonight.
He is.
He's
right here. Stand up. 89 years old, and last night, my wonderful publisher took us to a glass sauna on the side of the water. My dad got in the sauna and then got in your seat, and it was cold.
He also told that, I asked like if they already knew when you were younger or you were a kid that you would be a writer, and he said that when you were 5 you wrote your first novel.
Well, thanks, Dad. Did he tell you the title?
No.
Yeah, thank you for not telling me the title.
No, we have to kind of.
So, this book, I dictated a story to my mother, and she wrote it down, and then I drew pictures. She put it between 2 pieces of cardboard and bound it. This was a print run of one, my first edition and only edition of a book that I call The Giraffe, the Pig, and the Pants on Fire. Early on that I might have had some problems.
Well, he also told you were clever, you had a lot of friends, so they knew that, whatever you would start doing, you would, be successful. But he also told that you used to play piano, and you still do.
That is true.
Daily basis, or?
When I'm not on book tour, pretty daily.
So, I think one of the reasons, it was for Problem States, that is for you, so would you be up for...
Let me just tell you something. When you bring in the best pianist in Finland to play like that, the chances are about 0.
He was only warming you up.
So,
it's a gorgeous how about we, a little...
Remember, I write books. This is not my day job. So, I don't know if you know this, but Netflix has picked up The Secret of Secrets. They're going to make a series. And we have a great composer who's doing the music. What I haven't told Netflix is that I'm doing the theme song. They don't know this yet. I guess they'll find out tonight. So I'm going to play you something that I'm in the middle of writing. I'll probably bang through it, but if all goes to plan, in about a year and a half, you can turn on Netflix and hear this with a full orchestra.
Wow.
piano is still here. The pianist left, I'm hoping.
That was so good. People say it can be spontaneous, but it was. Gee, that was amazing.
Thank you.
So how much do you play? Like every day you practice for an hour or two?
It's kind of funny. I work in one end of the house where I have no phone. I don't talk to publishers or attorneys or anybody in the real world. I just go and then I work. And then as I come back, I work from 4 a.m. until about noon.
Right.
And so, you've slept, say 6 or 7 hours in the dream state, in fantasy world, and then you spend another 8 hours in fantasy world. And by the time you come back to the real world, you don't recognize it, usually. And I walk past the piano, I usually stop, I might play for half an hour, 45 minutes, just improvising. I find that it really is a nice bridge back into the real world, really. Music comes from a different place, but music is very, very similar to writing books, writing music. And I was amazed that the piece that we heard to start, he actually wrote that. That was just beautiful. And I heard it at almost like prose. Good music requires structure. Good novels require structure. Good music has thematic material that rises and falls at different times, the same with great novels. You've got to understand dynamics. You can't have everything loud. And in a novel, you can't have 5 car chases in a row. You need the quiet things to make other things really work. You have to understand tempo, pacing. So when I'm writing music, it really feels very, very similar to writing fiction. And that's something a lot of people wouldn't imagine, but I feel like they're very, very related.
That's impressive. Thank you. Thanks for playing. So the next topic, the main theme in the book is life after death. And as I understood that maybe 9 years ago, your mother passed away, and that made you think about what happens after life. And you have told that before that you've been quite skeptical of any such thing as afterlife.
Yes.
So is your main protagonist, Robert Langdon, he's a skeptic?
He is a skeptic, and if you'd asked me 8 years ago, what happens when we die, the answer is nothing. It's total blackness. It's like a computer's cable's been cut, just the end. And that's really what I've always sensed. I think a lot of religious ideas about heaven are great, they make us feel good, but they don't make a lot of scientific sense, or so I thought. When I wrote The Lost Symbol, I introduced a character named Catherine Solomon, and I knew at some point I'd want to write a book about consciousness. So when I started this book, I was already writing about consciousness, and my mom had been sick for quite some time and passed away as I was starting this book. And it was very difficult, and simultaneously I found myself asking, well, what does happen when we die? And I was asking it because some of the research I was doing in consciousness felt like it had enormous implications for what happens when we die. And so as I started this book, I felt my perception of death shifting. And I'll just, without ruining anything, tell you that our current model of consciousness is called local consciousness. It's that all of your hopes and dreams and thoughts are manufactured right here in your brain. They are the result of chemical processes in the brain. In that model, your brain creates consciousness. And that's how it feels to us, that's how we've learned it, that's what makes sense. And the challenge with that is that there are a lot of anomalies, a lot of phenomena that would imply that's not true. And we've all heard of stories of somebody who dies on an operating table, they're dead for 15 minutes, they're resuscitated, and they come back and they tell the doctor, I saw the whole thing. I was floating up on the ceiling and I was looking down at my body, and the doctor says, your eyes were taped shut, you didn't see anything, and by the way, there was no brain activity and your heart had stopped. And the person said, look, I don't know how it happened, but I saw the guy in the green shirt come in with that machine, and you said this, and then somebody else came in, and the doctor said, you're right, that's exactly what happened. We don't know why that's happening, but it does. That would be very, very hard to do with our current model of consciousness. And there's a new model of consciousness rising up that is really quite exciting, that has to do with non-local consciousness, and I won't get into it, the book does, but it has to do with consciousness being somewhere else, and that your brain is more of a receiver. And in that model, if you can imagine that a radio breaks, the signal is still out there. Maybe it's self-aware, maybe it's picked up by something else, But this notion that your brain does not create who you are, but rather receives who you are, is an enormous shift for death. And it's over the course of 8 years, that's where I came out on the other side, really feeling like the consciousness that we experience is not as we thought, and it's quite exciting.
Do you keep studying it from now on? Like, are you done with the subject, or now when the book is out, are you going to do like more research for yourself?
Well, the great thing is I've talked to so many scientists about this, and I've encrypted them into the novel. They're in all these different places, and they're excited about that. So every time something new happens, which seems to be every week, I get an email. Dan, you're going to be excited. Look at this experiment. So I'm keeping track of it as we go from a bunch of great minds who are very kind to pretend that I understand what they're talking about.
That's really interesting. And I think in this book, Landon, who is a skeptic, kind of grows into believing in this as well.
Yes, Langdon's journey, which takes place over the course of a day, is really mirroring my journey, which took eight years. As I said, he's smarter than I. It took me 8 years to figure it out. But the other fun thing about it is a lot of the science in this book is, it's told through analogy and metaphor. It's very easy to understand, but it's absolutely shocking. And all of the experiments in this book are true. They really happen, and I've had people say, I read the whole book with Wikipedia opened, I couldn't believe everything in this book was true. These experiments have actually happened. But the first time you read one of these experiments as a reader, you think, this can't be true. Or at least that was my experience when I first read the papers. This can't be true. And right as you're getting anxious that I'm going to ask you to believe this as a writer, Langdon says, this can't be true. And he plays the skeptic through the whole novel, so you can just relax and know that every time something sounds crazy, he's right there to say that's crazy. And Catherine very slowly says, Robert, listen, how about this, or how about this, or let me show you this. And as Langdon slowly gets indoctrinated into these ideas and starts to believe them, you as the reader come along as well.
Right, yeah, and as a reader for myself, this was completely new information. And I think, for instance, for myself, because I'm a non-believer, it's really comforting to read something like this.
Yes.
To see that there's actually scientific evidence that supports this kind of...
Sure, and I should mention that my shift in perspective, my believing that consciousness is much more complicated than we thought, and that on some level it transcends the death of the body, that was based on science. That I did not have a religious experience. My mom did not speak to me. I haven't had a near-death experience or ESP. I've never had one of those experiences. I'd love to have one. I haven't had one, but the science really has persuaded me.
Right. Science and religion, I think they have played a role. They have been like two opposites in your books before as well.
Yes.
So, and I think, for instance, the Da Vinci Code, there's a huge power that comes from like these two things colliding, basically. So, is that something you are really interested in?
Well, if you think of how I grew up with a mathematician and a very religious church organist, it's no wonder I'm confused. But these books were my searches. I'm sorry, you had to witness me sort of going, which way is up through all of these books.
Yeah.
And my mom had a great saying. She said that science and religion are two different languages attempting to tell the same story. And I've really come to believe that that's true. And one of the challenges with religion is that people will read it literally. When there are these beautiful metaphors and beautiful stories that can teach in a metaphorical sense, when we step in and read it literally and say, no, there really was an Adam and an Eve, then all of a sudden science comes over and says, no, there's this thing called evolution. That's where they start to clash. But if you step back and read science with a rational mind and read religion with a metaphorical point of view, they're not in conflict at all.
Right.
In fact, what's kind of funny is that this book and science right now is saying, wait a minute, we might receive inspiration. We don't create inspiration. Thoughts may not just appear. They may come from somewhere. And if you read the Bible or many, many other religious texts, you hear the word of God. An angel, gives you something. It all flows in. There are very, very few instances in the Bible where somebody goes, I've got it. I figured it out. No. they're always inspired by something that flows in from outside. So all of a sudden you've got science and religion going, maybe we are friends after all. I guess we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be exciting decade because there's a lot of science that's coming out now that's really quite exciting.
Yes, it is. Great, thank you. And finally, to the book, Secret of the Secrets. I've heard, I'm not quite sure if it's you said that or somebody else about the book, but I've been hearing this, it's a book of books. Have you said that?
I've never heard that. I've never said it. I like it. Let's go.
Obviously, since after reading the book, I heard this before reading the book, and now I feel like there's so much information, so much like science and so much interesting stuff. I think it might refer to that. But nevertheless, it took you 8 years to write this one, and it was this period was longer than the previous books. So what changed? Like, was the process different? Did you want to take more time to finish the book, or it's just
If I could have written this book in 3 years, I would have done it, believe me.
Right.
I didn't think it would take me this long. Consciousness is a very, very hard topic to write about. You're a writer, so you will understand this. If you take an antimatter bomb and put it in the Vatican, and then kill cardinals every hour, the book writes itself. If you say, let me write a thriller about a complicated science that people can't even decide what it is, a little harder.
Yeah.
And so it took me a long time to figure out what I call the way into the story. When I was writing Inferno, I wanted to write about Dante's Divine Comedy and overpopulation. I said, how are they related?
Yeah.
And the way in was that there was a villain who saw Dante's hell as prophecy. That's the way in.
Yeah.
And with this book, the way in was that Catherine has written this manuscript about this topic. And a lot of the time was spent editing, really pulling out Swedenborg and throwing them away. Those are the sorts of things that take time, and I'm very, very fortunate to have had enough success that I can take time.
Yeah.
And I have wonderful publishers who, listen, every publisher I have would have loved this book to have been delivered 5 years ago. She's like, but to my publisher's credit, they all say, listen, it takes the time it takes.
Yeah.
We've done business in the past, and we know you're going to hand us a good book. Just make sure the book's great. And that took me longer than usual.
I think it's great. I think it's, I've read all the books, and I think this is, it's the best so far.
Thank you.
And I love them all. So, and this is one of those books you really, it took me a long time to read, because, every now and then I have to stop and Google.
Yeah.
and learn more, do some research on my own. And one of those things was, that it was so interesting, was the Savant syndrome.
Yes.
Where, well, maybe you could...
Well, I mean, this is one of the anomalies that I'm talking about, these paranormal events that make us wonder how consciousness really works. There is a phenomenon called sudden savant syndrome. Some of you may have heard of it. As an example, a young boy in Arizona, an American kid, got hit in the head with a baseball, was knocked unconscious, woke up, and could speak fluent Mandarin Chinese. There is no baseball that carries the entire Chinese language. She said, how could that happen? It seems impossible, yet it happened. There are many, many examples of this. It's called sudden savant syndrome or sudden virtuoso syndrome, where somebody who's never seen a piano falls off his bike, hits his head, wakes up, and can play like the gentleman who we just heard at the beginning of the show. Maybe not that well, but well. And so these are the sorts of things that make you, at very least, say, our model of consciousness does not fit the data. It may make sense to us that our brain creates consciousness, but it's not accurate. And there was a time in our history as humans when we believed the Earth was the center of the solar system. And it made perfect sense to us. Until Copernicus started spotting anomalies and said, that star's in the wrong place, that planet's in the wrong place, our model is flawed. And when enough anomalies appeared, he said, let's put the sun at the center, see what happens. Let's change the model. And all of a sudden, all the anomalies disappeared. And as you'll learn in this book, if you envision consciousness as non-local, all of these anomalies suddenly disappear. Which leads me in a scientific way to believe that that the model is going to change.
That is so interesting. I'm going to go home and Google more. We have one more question before we have a couple of questions from the readers.
Great.
The last thing I'd like to ask is, what would you like to, readers find in this book? Like if they have to take one or two things from it.
If you take only one thing from this book, I hope you take remembering how fun it is to read a book. We all get so caught up in reading is so important for our culture and for your mind. When we watch TV, and I love TV, I've made TV shows, but it does all the work for you. You're sitting there, you're just consuming images and sounds. When you read a book, it is exercise for your brain. It makes you imagine everything. You have to hear every character, see every scene. And it is just so good for you. And the great thing about books is that you can read one and your neighbor can read one, and you can find out that you actually disagree, and you can have a conversation with somebody you barely even know about something like consciousness. So above all, if you take one thing, take a renewed love of reading. I hope this book inspires you to run out and read all sorts of books. Max's book, for example. And if there's something else to take, I just hope people take enough of an interest in the themes and the ideas that they start a dialogue, ideally with people that don't share their views. And that's something that's missing in the world today, is dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you. I had picked a couple of questions. We're running some time left, and I think this was just amazing. I'm going to read it out loud.
I'm nervous.
Just wanted to thank you for getting my husband interested in reading. He even took a day off from work to be here today. He wanted to celebrate his last week's birthday by being here. So, is he here?
Here.
Here. Good to see you here. So the question is, you seem to have had an interest in science for your whole life. What would you say is your strength or weakness in writing fiction that relies heavily on interesting facts?
Wow, what a great question. I would say that my strength is I'm open-minded, and I will listen to ideas that at first sound kind of nuts. And I would say my weakness is I get very, very caught up in my research, and I'll go entirely much, much deeper than I need to go to write this book. And at some point I realize I'm procrastinating, that I'm not a scientist, I'm actually a thriller writer. So I would say that's the challenge, that I get very, very interested in what I'm doing. Perhaps...
That doesn't sound too bad.
Well, I know enough to take it out of the book. I won't put too much in.
All right. Thank you. The next one. As a young reader, I'm 15 years old, who has recently started reading your books. I'm very impressed for how you managed to incorporate so much science and history into your fiction books. Unfortunately, science and history are not topics that really interest my generation. How do you think we as a society could change or improve this?
Wow, what a great... You're 15? Okay, well, we've had enough time tonight. You know what? It's, I would hope that, you say they're not things that interest your generation. I'm not entirely, I'm sure you're right, and yet I'm really hoping that these ideas are delivered in a way that are exciting enough that you forget that you're learning. All the best teachers teach you in ways that you don't see coming. I had a librarian once say to me, your books are like eating vegetables, but it tastes like ice cream. I didn't know whether I was insulted or complimented, I wasn't sure. But she said, no, I mean that in the best way. And she was actually referring to young readers, saying, young readers can read these books, and it tastes like ice cream. It just tastes like an adventure. But when it's over, they say, wait a minute, I've learned about Prague, and I've learned about New York publishing, and I've learned about human consciousness. I read the book to follow what's happening to characters, but when I wasn't looking, it's like people who feed you kale in a brownie. which you really shouldn't do. It's not a polite, it's a terrible brownie. But you understand what I'm trying to say? And it's funny that you would say that at 15. I've been on book tour for a while now, and I've talked to a lot of young people, and a number of them have said to me that the novel, any novel, is the one place that's left where you can look at a page of text that has no hyperlinks. You read only what the author is telling you to read. You don't have to make choices. You don't have somebody jumping out of the back saying, click here, click here. You're not reading a description of Charles Bridge, and Charles Bridge is underlined, you think, am I supposed to click and learn more? No, I did that for you. You get to read exactly what the author wants you to read. And it's a very liberating experience. I'm hearing from young people who are just deluged with clicking and swiping and all of that this is a new kind of cool, is what it is. It's a new kind of cool, was what this kid in Prague told me. That kids are coming back to reading, and young people are and if you don't like science and history, what do you like? And then find the authors who are writing about that. Or better yet, maybe open your mind to things you think you didn't like. I didn't love history as a student. I love it now. I'm not sure why, but that happens in life. Your tastes change.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Great question. Wow.
It is, yeah. I remember 20-year-old me or my friends at the time reading Da Vinci Code, for instance. It was like you actually learned some art history and you loved every minute of it.
Great.
And that was just strange at the time.
That's right. Art history.
Yeah. All right. The next one. Do you think humanity needs mysteries more than it needs answers? And if so, which mystery would you personally prefer never to be solved?
Wow.
Christina, 8 years old.
How old are you? I think this evening has to end very soon. These questions are I think we do need mystery, and I think that's where spirituality comes from. That there's some questions that you don't want answered. You want to wonder. And as an example, sitting out under a starlit sky, you're looking up at all of these stars, and you're saying, space goes on forever. I can't get my head around that. And it's frustrating, but it's also a great reminder of how small we are, how small our problems are, how petty our differences are. So I think mystery helps us. It's a reminder that we are not the center of the universe, and that we should treat each other with a little bit more kindness and maybe not take ourselves quite so seriously. So I think mystery is more important than answers. And the thing about answers that I keep finding with science is the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know. We suddenly say, wow, gravity exists. Well, how does that work? And all of a sudden there's all these questions about how gravity possibly works. And at the subatomic level, what they're learning about consciousness is the same way. You solve one problem and 3 new ones pop up because of what you now know. So I don't think that we will ever be short of mysteries. I think the more we learn, the more mysterious the world gets.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. There was like 150 of them.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's no time for all the questions.
This is my friend. I should tell you, I had a night. I was giving the penguin lecture in India. We had a huge room of people, and we'd had this amazing interactive night where I'd answer all these questions, and I felt like everything went perfectly. We were in perfect sync. And they said, one more question. I leaned back and thought, this is going to be great. This has been a great night. And this young child stood up and said, do you believe in God? I was like seconds away from a clean getaway.
Curveball.
Yeah. Curveball.
Well, we're not going to go into that.
Thank you. I realized I shouldn't have even said that.
So, from behalf of everybody, thanks so much, Lebron, for being here. It's been amazing. Thank you.